is to make one of the drawers. Two sides, a front and a back. They've been resting, relaxing for a week or so. I've checked them and they've remained flat, no twist, no cup, no bowing. So here we go with making a drawer. So here's the opening we're going to fit the drawer to. And one of the pieces here, I'm going to make this the drawer back. Now this drawer is going to be a box. I want the back to be the same size as the front. So I'm going to fit the drawer back in the opening of the front. I'm going to take the piece, poplar. Here's my side that I know is square from the mark before. Setting it so, like so, pushing it tight against this end. And what I'm going to do is reach around the back and mark the top. And I'm going to mark this right end over here. I'm going to go cut it oversized and then fit it by hand. Now this piece, I cut it a little short of 1/4 of an inch. Too wide and too long. I'm going to sneak up on the dimension. I want to go in the opening with no noticeable movement up or down or sideways. I took it to the joiner and I hogged away some material, leaving it about 1/8 of an inch or less too wide. And now I want to fit it in the opening. And what I'm doing here is put it on a chute board with a plane. Now this plane is made for this purpose, but you can use this jack plane. This hot dog right here will come off and fit onto here. Or you can use it just like so, but it's easier on your hand if you're pushing against this hot dog. At any rate, this works as well as does this. But this chute plane, or miter plane as it's called, is made for this purpose. And I'm going to sneak up on this thickness here so it fits very tightly in that opening. And what I've determined thus far is on this end it's getting pretty close to its final dimension, but on this end it's a little heavier than on that end. So I'm taking extra off of this end here, and then I'll take it all the way down, and I'll go fit it. So I'm going to mark this. I'm going to mark this like so. This will be the inside right side. So it's still a little heavy over here and a little bit heavy over here. It's almost there. It's fatter over here on this side than it is over here. So I'm going to go back here and take a little more off of the far end, which will be the end closest to me here. I've oriented this thing so I'm not like I would at the joiner. I don't want to tear out any grain. So take a little more off here and go all the way through. Let's see what we've got. So I'm taking a little more off, and it fits nicely over on the side closest to me. And that's perfect. Exactly what I want. Now I'll fit the ends. So on the right hand side, you can see it's tight at the bottom, a little gap up here. So either the board is not square or the opening's not square. I can't do much about the opening at this point, but I can take some a little bit off over here and get this so it's even top to bottom. So here's how I'm going to do that. This is the bottom, this is the top. Remember, the bottom was tight and the top had a gap. So I'm going to take off the bottom, back at the chute board again. I can see the gap right here. Can't see it in the camera. So I'm going to take a little bit off the bottom here. So this end now is as square as my shooting board is square. So when I put it back in the opening, what I get is a perfect fit. So the board is not square. Now I'll go to the other side. I'm going to mark it on the inside, and I'll fit this end to the opening. I've got enough here. I want to take it to the saw and cut it, and then bring it back to the shooting board. So I cut it off with a saw, with the chop saw, and I've left myself less than 1/16 of an inch to take off with the plane. I fit this in the opening, and I found that the saw cut fits pretty well in the opening, but of course it's a little too long. When I plane this in, if I don't do something to correct it, I'm going to blow out over here. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to turn the piece over. I'm going to tilt it like so. Take off a little bit of wood. Turn it back over against the fence. Now I can't blow it out over there until I get down to the bottom. I've got a little notch I put in it. And I keep at this until I get it so it fits the opening. My cut is just like I want it. There's a gap neither at the top nor the bottom. It's even. And it turns out that the board that I chose to use for the drawer fronts was not wide enough to make 2 drawer fronts. It was, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch shy of what I needed. So to address this problem, I can toss the board out and replace it, but what I'm chosen to do, because I like this piece of wood, is I have glued a piece of white pine on each side of the drawer front. What that does is increases the width so that it matches the piece that I've made for the back. This will all come off later. This pine that I've scabbed on will ultimately be cut off when we get to the cock bead, which you see on this pine drawer front. It's about 3/32 thick, so we'll be taking 3/32 off of each side of the drawer front to accommodate this cock bead. So it turns out the board is wide enough, but temporarily I need it full width so we can cut the dovetails. So for right now, I fit the drawer front with these scabbed on pieces of pine. I got the joint on the right hand side as good as I know how to make it. The gap between the leg and the drawer front is it's just a line. There's no thickness to it at all. On the other end, it's just like with the back earlier. It's too long, so I'm going to mark it for length from the back side. Now, if this were a piece of casework that had dust panels top and bottom, I couldn't reach under here and do this. What I could do is leave the back off the casework and come in from the back and do these markings on the back side. We got my pencil line. It's about less than 1/4 inch too long. I'm going to cut it off and fit it on this side. So now the drawer front is fit. It fits in the opening. It's nice and tight. Joints are even all the way around. And we still have this pine on here. It's no more than 1/16 of an inch thick now that I've got it sized down to fit the opening. Here are the two drawer sides, and my marks are still here, indicating this is my square edge. I've checked them on the table of the bandsaw. They're still flat, no bowing, no cupping, no twisting. What I need to do is get the width the same as the drawer back and drawer front. So what I've done is I've taken my panel gauge and I set it to the width of the drawer back, like so. Now I can set the drawer back aside and mark the drawer sides. I want to put my fence against the straight side here and mark it end to end. I'm going to mark both of them. Here's my straight side, goes against the fence of the panel gauge. Now I have run the two drawer sides over the jointer to hog off some of that material. They're still too wide to fit in the opening, but I want to cut them to length first. I have marked the drawer fronts, so they go like so. This is the top. On this corner, I've got an R. That means it's the top, inside, right side of the drawer. On the other piece, I've got an L that's upside down to the camera. This is the top, left side, drawer side. So they go like so. Now the length, I want the dovetail to stop about 1/2 inch short of the front of the leg, and then I want them to stop a little bit short of the back leg. So taking those two items into consideration, the drawer side needs to be 15 inches long. So I'm going to cut them to that length. I failed to mention, and I need to mention, top front right, top front left. These cuts are square to the top. The squares, I know how to make them. They're both the same length. If they aren't, our drawer is going to be some kind of a trapezoid. The front and back cuts need to be square to the top and ultimately to the bottom. The only thing left to do here is to fit these drawer sides into the opening. So I'm going to do that with a chute board. Now I've penciled in the mark made by the panel gauge so you can see it. You can do this on the jointer if you choose. This is the way I prefer to do it. There's seldom, if ever, one way, and only one way, to do a task in woodworking. This makes no noise, makes no dust to breathe. It's just pleasant to do. I'm about 2/3 there, I think. Got a little off the mark, so I'm gonna take a little extra off back here, and I'll give it a try. We're almost there here. It's a little heavier back here on which is the front end of the drawer side. Okay, that gets the right one, and we'll do the left one. In this case, I've got to do my mark is on this side. I've got to turn the board over because the grain is running this way. On this side, it's running this way, and if I plane that way, it's going to tear out. I have to turn it over like so. I have to turn it back over to keep checking my progress. See, this is taking full width shavings, full width, full length, one shaving. And it's dead square because of the shoot board. Okay, that takes care of the drawer sides, front and back, so we're ready to cut some dovetails. Okay, here are the drawer parts laid out, front, back, left side, right side. They're marked, the squiggly lines that showed the square edge going back, and these were milled from the top. These are the insides marked L here and right here. This is the front. Stand it up like so. I have two choices here. I can cut a half blind dovetail on the front here. That's one option. And another one is to resaw this front into two pieces, which is what I've done. I'm going to take away this piece. Now I can do a through dovetail here and here. And when I glue that other piece back on the front, it'll, for all intents and purposes, it will look like a through dovetail. The line here where it was cut, where the resaw was made, will be covered by the cock bead on the top and the bottom. And on the side, you will see a half blind dovetail, and the line that terminates the dovetail will be this resaw line. So if I hadn't told you that, you'd never have known it. Now, any hope we have of making this drawer fit the opening will be defeated if this angle right here is not square to the bottom. And the reason is, let's exaggerate and say the angle here, instead of 90 degrees measured up, is 85 degrees. That means this thing is going to tilt down when I dovetail it. Now suppose the other one is square. So the drawer is going to look like so. Square on the right, bottom edge of the sides are not parallel. The drawer is going to try to ride up or down, depending on which way the joints are out. It'll never fit in the opening. So we must do everything within our realm of our possibilities to make this joint square. Not so much the back, but the front has to be square because it's guiding the riding in. There's a couple things we have to do. When I put my square, this angle right here, which is the bottom edge and the front edge, I put my square on there, turn it up like so. I'm going to pick this board up. I'm going to hold it up to the light and see if I can see any daylight between the blade and this edge here. And when I do so, there's no light whatsoever. That's as good as I can get it. I've done the same thing with the other side. This is as good as I know how to make it. Now I've set my marking gauge to the thickness of the front, plus a little bit, and I'm going to use that setting to mark the depth of the tails on the sides. So that's this mark here. Now the next step is I'm going to cut a little rabbet on the inside face of both of the sides. And the reason for that will come up a little later, make all the sense in the world once you understand how I'm going to use it. But for right now, I'm just going to set up my block plane and plane these rabbets. And the next thing I've done, I failed to film it, so I'm going to have to just tell you what I've done. I put the sides in the vise on the bench. Got my skew block plane here. The side is missing. It's removable. It has a nicker on the front. The nicker is just a wheel, exactly like this wheel on the marking gauge. It extends below the sole of the plane, and it'll ride in the mark that I made with the marking gauge. I set the blade. Blade is skewed to the cut. So I set the blade so that this front corner right here is right on that line. And I made two passes on this board, and I got two shavings, full length, full width. That's all the rabbet I need. Then I changed in the vise, same thing with this one. So that's all I need. Now what I've done here is I've taken those two drawer sides, insides facing up, folded them together, turned them up on end, and you're looking at the ends right here. This line in the middle is those two rabbets facing each other, and together both of them are less than the kerf width of my dovetail saw. Now I want a half pin on each end, so I've arbitrarily put a line right here, just estimated 1/4 of an inch. And what I'm going to do is take my dividers, and I'm going to put one point on that pencil mark right there, and I'm going to walk down here 1, 2, 3 times. And I'm a little too big, and I'll explain why I say that here in a second. We'll try again. 1, 2, 3. Now the difference between this point and my pencil mark here for the other half pin, that distance, it will be the width of the dovetail at the bottom, the narrowest part. It's a little too wide for my liking. So I'm going to open this thing up just a little. I can go either way. This time I'm going back this way. 1, 2, 3. Now I've got a distance of about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to open it up just a wee bit more. And the amount I open it up is multiplied by 3 going across. So I'm going to go back. 1, 2, 3. I've got 3/32. This is just trial and error. Get what size tail do you want and how many tails do you want. I'll just stick with that. That's about 1/8 of an inch. Now, I'm going to go on this side, and now I'm going to push down and make a mark. And I'll go again, make a mark. Then I'm going this side, do the same thing going back the other way. Make a mark and make a mark. So now I've got 2 marks here, 2 marks here, and 1 on either end. So I'll take the dovetail marker, set it right here. It'll make be a little easier to see, and it will make a finer line. Pin in the indentation from the dividers and draw this line here if I can get the pen to work. There we go. Then I can draw the tail on the front down to here. I can move over to the near one over here. Same thing. Draw the tail on the front. I can flip it over, get the other one. Tail on the front. Pin in the hole. Tail on the front. Now this one over here gets this way on the end. Flip it over and get the one on the other end, which you cannot see camera right now, but you get the picture. Okay, now take my square and extend these to the other side. The dovetail marker was not wide enough to go all the way across the stock this thick. Doesn't matter. Just extend them over. Put the pin in the same hole. You see you get the lines lining up exactly. Okay, now the material I want to remove. This, and this. And we'll mark it on the front, same way. Trying to eliminate a mistake. Okay. Okay, I've cleaned up these tails with chisel and I'm ready to cut the pins. Here's the rabbet we cut. This is the right side of the drawer. This little R right here. Also got an R right here, all ever facing the inside or the front so I can see them after it's assembled. I'm going to register that edge of that rabbet against this pin board here, which is the drawer front, like so. That's the sole purpose of that rabbet. What I've done is I've taken a plane, any plane, put it on the bench and set this pin board, drawer front, flush with the top. Then I move the same plane way out as far as I can get it, support the opposite end. The reason I want it as far as I can get it is I'm going to put some weight on it, left hand, as I mark these, transfer these marks to this pin board. Now, the closer that is, the shorter this piece is. Of course, the more I have to move this in. The farther out you can push it, the more leverage you can get with your pressure to keep this thing from slipping. So I'm going to take a board, any board, and line up the drawer bottom like so over here. That's why I needed this strip of pine glued to the cherry. So these will be the same width, then I can line them up like so. Now I mentioned before how important it is that this cut here, you cut the end off, be square to the bottom, because if it isn't, the two sides might do this, up or down, either way, depending on how the mistake is. And the drawer is just going to be warped, won't fit the opening. But if you don't get this tight against this rabbet, or if it slips while you're marking it, and then you cut to those wrongly marked locations, you're going to come out the same way. If it slips like so, I'm going to turn it a lot so you can see it. If it slips in that direction, see what happens out on the far end, of the drawer. Watch how far the far end of the drawer moves if I move this just a wee little bit. The drawer is really going to be warped. It will not fit the opening. So you have to be extremely careful that you register these two pieces together exactly where you want them before you mark them. Also, it's very easy to get the wrong piece up here or get the wrong end up here. Hence these marks. Try to keep everything straight. Now I have a marking knife here, small enough to fit inside these very small pins here. So I'm going to put my right hand and hold this board here to line up the bottom of the side with the bottom of the drawer front. I'm going to pull it forward towards me so the rabbet hooks on the back side of this drawer front. I'm going to put pressure down with my left hand. With my right hand, I'm going to mark these. Now I can't see down inside this cavity here. There's not enough light down, so I'm having to do it by feel, pushing this marking knife hard against the face of the tail. So there it is marked. I can see them. They all go all the way across. Now I'm going to mark the waist. So the waist is the opposite of the other one. So this is it right here. I'm going to take my square here, marking knife. I'm going to extend each one of these lines down. These go perpendicular to the end of the board. So, all right. Okay, here's one of them. The sequence doesn't matter. You just need to get them all. Should have one over here. Should have two right in here. I'm going to mark waist. Make these lines visible. I'm going to have to ink them in. Put the pen in. This wood is so hard. I have taught myself over the years to saw vertically. I don't want to wander off the line. So I always put the board in the vise vertical. I want the saw cut. These saw cuts are parallel to the top and bottom of the side of the drawer front. So I check board position in the vise to make sure it's in there vertically. I increase my chances of making a vertical cut if I do it that way. I'm trusting my ability to hold this saw vertical. See how I've done with a square. This off just a little bit. Now I'm going to cut the rabbet in the back. So we cut this one full length, full width shaving. It's curled up because the blade is skew. We're going to cut another one. This should give it the same depth as on the front to try to keep the drawer square. Laying out the dovetails on the back end of the drawer sides. Tails are always cut on the drawer side. That's the way you get the mechanical advantage. Pins are cut on the drawer front and the drawer back. You'll notice these lines don't quite line up. Some of them are fat, some of them are not so fat. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is that this angle is 90 degrees. None of this, none of this. I want the angle between the saw and the face of the board to be 90 degrees, as close as I can get it. And these lines right here for the tails go off this way and this way. But I want to cut vertically. So I'm going to take my dovetail marker and I'm going to put it against the bench. Now half of these lines are vertical. And see how well I did keeping it square. And it's almost dead square, which is a good thing. I'm going to move it. I taped them together before I did this so they move, and I don't want them to move with relationship to each other, just the relationship to the bench. And they move, so I got to line it back up. Now I can cut the other three. Cutting on the waist side of the line. So I want to point out again that the only thing that really matters in cutting these tails, the only angle that really matters, is that this is square. This cut here is square in this way. Each one of these is square. The angle here doesn't matter. If it's off a little, it'll be compensated for when we cut the pins. So they're all cleaned up, ready now to mark and cut the pins. Put the chisel right in the kerf of the marking gauge and further establish that line. I don't want it to disappear. And notice that I am looking this way to get this thing square. If I stand over here and look that way, I can never get it square in this direction. You have to look parallel to the cut. If I did a good job of making these saw cuts, the only chisel work will be to clean out the bottom after I've cut this off with a fret saw. So I'll clean that up and then we'll see how I did. I put the pin board here, which is the back of the drawer, back into the vise. And I clean this up from this position. Again, I'm putting the chisel right in the kerf of the marking gauge, establish that sharp corner, and then I just clean it out by hand. You can do this with a router if you choose. Put something on both sides to support the router base, set the depth to the bottom of the marking gauge mark, and just clean it out with a router. Then all you have left to do with the chisel is clean up the bottom corners. My bench here can adjust the height. I can raise this bench up, and I'll do it now just to show you. Save my back. I'm gonna raise it up 2 inches. Go to the far end, raise it up, a little easier on the back. That's the only problem with doing this kind of work by hand. It's not always easy on your back. You can cut this entire joint with a router in one of those dovetail jigs. I used to have one. Sat on the shelf for about 10 years, then I sold it. Makes too much noise. Got to be sure there are no high spots down there on the bottom. One little high spot will prevent the joint from closing like I want it to. Of course, the router won't leave high spots. Now, I'm going to take it out of the vise. I can't very well show this on the camera because I don't have enough hands, but I'm going to sit down in the chair, hold this in my hand, and I'm going to check it every which way I can with a straight edge. I'm going to rock it back and forth this way, flat on the edge, and look at my joint, looking for high spots. And I'll clean them off, but I can't, as I said, I can't very well show that on the camera. Okay, I got the bottom of the pin board on this left end, back left corner of the drawer, all cleaned up, checked it for no high spots. Now the chisel has not touched the sides of these pins. You can see the saw kerf in every case. The only thing I've done with the chisel is clean up the bottom, paying particular attention to the corner, being sure I get it out, cleaned out well. Back left, back left. So this should fit BL, or back left. So they go together like so, right off the saw. Let's see how I did. See how well this fits together. So that's it. Now what you're seeing there, the joints is the ends of the tails are proud of the back. They'll be planed off. The drawer side, the tail board, is set out proud of the end of the drawer back because the drawer back fits the opening. I'll plane the side off flush with the end of the board, front and back. It should fit, theoretically. We will see. I got to do the other side and we'll see if we can fit this drawer together. All right, it's time to glue up the drawer. I got the pieces laid out, two sides, tops, outboard. They're marked top left, top right over here. On the outside of the front, got left and right marked. On the back, it's marked back, right, and left. So they just all tilt up like that. That's the way they go together. But like the table, there's a sequence here that matters. I have to put this pin board in this way, turn it over and put in this one this way. Then go to the back. That's the way we have to proceed because you know the way it won't work. So here we go. I'm going to use the hide glue again because it gives me more open time. And if I have to take something apart, I can do so with this hide glue. And I'm not so much concerned about squeeze out like I was on the table legs because I'm planing all these surfaces after we're done with the glue up. So here we go. Glue on the long grain, no glue on the end grain. Go to this tail board. Okay, slide this one together. Be sure I got it right. There we go. This is the top. It's going to go this way. Got the top marked on the back, top marked on the front. Okay, we got glue on all the surfaces. All right, I got it glued together. I check it for square with this little device, pointed on the end so they fit in the corner. So I put it in this diagonal, I expand it inside to inside, and then I check it the other way. So I'm gonna let this dry overnight. Okay, now we've got the drawer out of the clamps. It's the next day after the glue up. So I gotta clean them up. Remember now that the drawer opening is the end of the back, the end of the front, the end of these pins right here. And the side itself is proud of that. So I got to plane the sides down flush with this to theoretically be the same size as the drawer opening. Now for the other side. Now when these clamps are on this drawer this way, these pieces of wood can bow either in or out. Playing this off will take out whatever residual bow is left in them. And the bow will defeat the drawer fitting properly in the opening. So I want to get rid of that. Okay, now let's go to the back. I want to show you this support here that I have on as I stand over far in from the camera. This support is a pipe clamp that has a floor flange and a piece of wood that allows it to stand up straight. Slide it underneath the edge of the drawer. So that end is done. I'll turn it around now and do the other end. So that end is done. I'm going to glue this piece on here that I resawed off. But before I can do that, I need to get the ends of these tails here down flush with this, otherwise this joint won't close. Notice that the pine strip is glued on bottom and top so that this dimension is the same as the sides. Facilitates lining this all up. So I moved the table down on the floor so I can install the top runners. Got the left one in place. Notice that I've got the arrow pointing to the back, which is the side that's also been hand planed. All right, I have all four corners cleaned up. There's a little bit of work to do in a couple of places. What we have here is a through dovetail drawer front, drawer side. Remember, this is a bandsawn surface here, nothing done beyond the bandsawing itself. When I cover the ends of the through dovetail with the piece of wood that I cut off, it now becomes a half-blind dovetail for all intents and purposes. The only joint I can see that's not present in a half-blind dovetail is a joint right here and right here. And I'm going to make that go away when I put on the cock bead. Okay, I've cleaned up all the dovetails. Got this surface nice and flat. So what I want to do now is glue the piece that I cut off. I want to put this back on here and glue it down. Now, when you put glue between two boards, it's going to slide around. It's hard to stop it from moving just a little bit. But in this case, it doesn't matter because I'm going to cut off roughly 3/32 off of all four of these edges. So if it's off 1/16 of an inch this way or this way, won't matter. I'm going to cut it away nonetheless. So here we go with the glue. This time I'm using this brush to spread the glue. I don't want to leave any area starved for glue. I don't really care if I have squeeze out, doesn't matter. Okay, now I'll just turn it over. Push it around a little bit. I'm going to use these spring clamps to temporarily hold it, hopefully so it doesn't slide around much. I'm going to use these parallel jaw clamps because they reach pretty much all the way across. You can never have too many clamps. I'm just going to leave it right there in the vise overnight. Okay, it's been more than 48 hours. Now, taking this out of the clamps, and I've got this, what's now is a half-blind dovetail, if you will. This piece, the end here, is a little higher than this, so I've got to bring this, I've got to flush this up using a low-angle jack plane. Again, it's number 62. So there's that joint. Now I got to do the other side. Now, here's the drawer in its opening, and it's a little too tight in this direction, which is understandable. Today is July the 15th. It's very, very hot and extremely humid, which means this drawer front is likely as wide in this direction, or high, if you will. It's at its maximum dimension. It's never going to get any bigger. As the winter approaches, fall and winter, it's going to shrink. If we were making this in the winter time, we'd have to be concerned about it growing, as it takes up moisture. But having made it in the summer, it's not going to grow any. I'm not going to count on it. But I do have to get it operating smoothly for the time in which I am building it. So two of the requirements of that is it has to be the right size. We have to install these runners and kickers underneath. So I've got them milled right here, and they are too large, of course. They've been resting for a week. Some of them are slightly warped, so I'm going to flatten them again and bring them to final dimension. So just like what we did with the legs, I have run these runners and kickers over the joiner, and I've gotten one edge and one face straight. I'm checking for square. Okay, so I'm going to put the curly Q on here just like we did before. In case you couldn't see it before, it doesn't matter what it looks like as long as you recognize what it is. And I will check every one of them the same way and mark them. I've said many times how difficult it is to do all this without screwing something up. And even in the dimensioning of this lumber, that applies. I have milled all of these drawer runners and kickers to thickness. Now I need to bandsaw them to width and then send them through the planer. Squiggly line, this is the square corner. I've got them lined up with the square corner on my upper left. So I lined all the pieces up, and I'm going to take them to the bandsaw already lined up. I'm going to send them through the bandsaw like this. Again, I'm trying to minimize the mistake of cutting off my square corner and then having to start over. Got the runners and kickers milled, thickness and width. Got to cut them to length. Now, here's my block plane. This kicker here, let's say, is going to go right here to prevent the drawer from, when it's open, from flopping down. But the bottom of it is going to rub against the top of the drawer, and it possibly can bind the drawer. So I want to be able to get in here and plane this surface after it's installed to facilitate the smooth operation of the drawer itself. So I want to cut this off short enough so that I can plane here. The plane's going to hit the leg. So I want to cut it off short of that. So there's the leg. So I'm going to cut it off back here. That'll leave plenty of length for the kicker to work properly, and also leave me enough room that I can plane it like so. This dimension is not critical. It's just enough to allow proper use of the block plane for the full length of the runners and the kickers. This is not just kickers, it's runners and kickers. Okay, here are the two runners and two kickers for this table. One goes here one goes down at the bottom. Same thing on the other side. But I have to do two things before I can even think about it, putting them in here, installing them. As I said, I'm going to plane the surface that faces the drawer after it's in place. So I want to be sure when I'm planing this direction, front to back of the table, that I'm planing with the grain. So I'm going to take all four of these pieces over to the bench, and I'm going to orient them like I think the grain is running. And then I'm going to test it because I want to smooth them up anyway. So let's go do that. Now, when I look at this edge, I think it doesn't really make any difference whether I plane this way or this way. I want to smooth it up before I install it anyway, so I'm going to try it like so. That'll work right there. I'm going to put an arrow on here pointing to the back because I want to install it. This is the front, this is the back. Let's do the rest of them. So now, in addition to the runner on which this holds up the bottom of the drawer, we also get a piece right here that makes the drawer run true in this horizontal plane. And the thickness of this piece is dictated by the distance from this surface of the leg to the inside of that apron. So recall, if you will, how fastidious I was at getting the mortise and the tenon for the apron in the same place on all 8 legs for 2 tables. Part of the reason for that is that allows me to make 4 of these the same thickness, and they should work. So what I'm going to do is mill this to the right thickness, then we're going to fasten this to this while we're on the bench, as opposed to doing it one piece at a time to the table itself. Okay, what I've done here is I've got a pair of drawer runners, a left and a right. The arrows are pointing to the back on both pieces. After these pieces are installed in the table, I can plane this way or this way on either side to facilitate the in and out of the drawer so it doesn't bind. Now I've got to square these off. When you screw these 2 pieces together, it's next to impossible to get these 2 exactly flush. It's also difficult to get the ends all in the same plane. Cut those off already, but I want to clean up these sides on the chute board because I want them to be square. If this were tapered this way or that way, then this piece here would also come up out of the plane, complicate the fitting of the drawer. So I want to take a very minimum off of here because this is the width that I want to make the drawer run true. So I've cleaned this one up already, and now I'll clean this one up over here. On this surface, the grain's running this way, or I'm planing this way, but frequently, and it's true on this board, you go the other side, got to plane the opposite direction. Now that same piece of poplar, I've gotten enough for my runners and kickers for both tables. I need 8 pieces. I get 2 out of each of these long ones, and 6, 7, 8. I need 8 pieces roughly, 3/4 thick, 1 1/4 wide, around 1 foot long. So they're rough milled to this point, and I'm going to set them up on edge and let them relax for a few days as well. Now I have these 2 screwed together drawer supports clamped in place, and got to try to adjust them for location. And this has got to be absolutely flush right here. If it's not, the drawer will catch on it, goes in. It's not easy to get it flush. Already got the other one close. So now the thing to do is to try to put the drawer in and see what happens. It operates smoothly. Now I want the drawer front to be flush with the blade here and here at the same time. And if the back supports of the drawer are too low or too high, it will tilt the drawer front out this way or down at the bottom. And right now, fingernail catches right here. So that means those drawer blades are a little too low in the back. And so I need to raise them up a little bit. I'm holding the camera by hand to do this, but here's what I've discovered here. I've got a feeler gauge in my right hand, and I'm trying to determine, you see the drawer move up and down right there. It's the bottom edge of the drawer. There's the groove for the bottom, and here is the drawer runner. I've put a feeler gauge between the drawer bottom and the runner. This is a 2/1000 thick, and it's tight. And what I'm doing here is I've got to determine if the left and right runners are parallel. So when I go to the other side, first thing I notice at the back edge right here, this drawer runner's 1/4 inch too low. I've got the camera back in the tripod. We're focusing right here. So this is where the 1/4 inch gap was a while ago. I'm taking the clamp off, and I can move this drawer runner up and down. It's clamped at the front but not the back. So what I'm doing is I'm going to push the drawer runner up with my thumb as I watch the drawer runner on the other side, and it's lifting the drawer up. I can see the crack on the right side, which you cannot see. It's wider, and when I let the pressure off my thumb, it comes back down on top of the drawer runner on the opposite side. So now I know that on the left side, it is reasonably close to parallel. So I'm going to put the clamp back on it. That little spring clamp won't hold much weight, but that's what I'm trying to do, is get the two drawer runners parallel so that if either one is too high, the drawer is going to rise as it goes in. It will not fit. So now the two drawer runners, the bottom ones, are reasonably close to parallel. So the drawer slides smoothly. As long as I support the front, it slides very smoothly, which is what I want. The next step now is I'm going to screw the two bottoms in place. If the bottom runners are in place and the drawer operates smoothly, but when you get it out to here, it's dropping down and it's not so smooth anymore. So there's a plan for that. And that plan is, if this, I call it a top runner, here's the arrow going back, turned upside down this way. I'm going to screw it in place so that the back end of the drawer cannot kick up. This will hold it down. So I moved the table down on the floor so I can install the top runners. Got the left one in place. Notice that I've got the arrow pointing to the back, which is the side that's also been hand planed. It's going down. Putting it in here like so. I'm feeling under here with my index finger on my left hand. I want it flush with the bottom of this. And then I can clamp it there. And then I try to feel this reveal. This is slightly lower than this. Otherwise it would push the top up above the top edge of the apron. Clamp that on like so. Check it and see how it feels. All of the secondary wood in these tables is going to be poplar, including the drawer bottom. So I'm resawing this piece of poplar into pieces that I'll show you how I put the drawer bottom together. So I've taken a piece of poplar. It was 3 inches by roughly 5 inches. I cleaned it up on the joiner so I had a smooth square edge to a smooth square side, and I resawed it 6 pieces. They're roughly 3/8 thick, and I need 2 drawer bottoms that are front to back about 13 inches. First off, I don't like plywood for a piece like this. I want to use solid wood. The grain direction is important. If I were to take a drawer that opened this way in and out, and I put the drawer bottom in so the grain was running parallel to the direction of the drawer. In other words, the grain is running just like the drawer would. If I put the drawer together that way and the humidity took over, spring to from summer to winter to summer to winter, it's going to expand and contract in this direction, which would cause the drawer to bind much, much more so than if I put the grain crossways. I want the drawer bottom to expand front to back. I'm going to fix the front of the drawer so all the expansion goes out the back. So I just cut these, and they need to relax for several days. So I'm going to stand them up on edge and leave them there. We'll get back to it later. Okay, here's the drawer front view. And if you notice, it doesn't have a bottom, nor done anything with the cock bead yet. And you're wondering, oh no, how's he going to get a bottom on? Well, 2 ways to do it. I'm going to do one drawer one way and one drawer another way, just to show options. This first one is put together without the slot in the bottom to contain the drawer bottom. So I'm going to show you how I do that. On the router table, I have a slot cutting bit. It's 3/16 wide, has a large bearing on it. So the slot that I'm going to cut is maybe 1/4 inch deep. I don't want to go any deeper than that. And I can cut on the inside of the box all the way around. I just have to clean up the corners. So what I'm going to do, put the drawer down over the router bit. I'll do it freehand against the bearing. Just run it all the way around the inside. Cut the groove. The bearing on that router bit is quite large. It will not fit into these corners very well, so it leaves wood that would have been taken out if the bearing were much smaller. So I've got to take some of that out. I found the best way to do it is with a mortise chisel, because I can use it prying. Got a 3/16 mortise chisel here that just fits right in the groove, and take it out like so. So it takes a couple of minutes to do one corner Consider also that the front two corners are done just like this one, but I got to cut the back two in a different way because I've got to make room for the bottom to slide into the groove. And that's true on any drawer, no matter how it's made. You got to get the bottom in and out of it. Now, in order to slide the drawer bottom in the groove we've made, I've got to remove this part of the drawer back below the groove. I'm going to do that at the table saw. First thing I do is remove the riving knife because it will interfere with what I want to do, and you'll see that in a moment. I'm going to lower the blade so that it's flush with the top of the piece I'm cutting, which is something you don't usually do. I'm making it this low because, I don't wish to cut into the side, drawer side, with kerf that's going to go up beyond the level of the inside of this drawer back. So I've got the drawer, I've got the blade height about where I want it. I'm going to have to do some trial and error cuts to get this side of the blade exactly on the line, which would be the top of the groove. So I just sneak up on it, get over far enough that I'm sure I'm not cutting off more wood than I want to cut. And I finished at the table saw. The saw cut probably 2 or 3 or 4 thousandths. Proud of where I want to be. I'd rather go up short than to go too deep. I'll take it down with the skew block plane like so. It'll only take a minute. And the width of this shaving is the width of the drawer back minus the depth of the groove. I want to get this all the way down, flush with the top edge of the groove. Now we can slide the drawer bottom in like so. But first we got to make it. I have here a box of scratch stock I have made and used over the years. Scratch stock is made out of old bandsaw blades. Start off by grinding off the teeth. A little safer that way. And just make quarter round. It's like a 3/8 inch quirk. A groove for letting in banding on the edge of a table. Here's the old, couple of old card scrapers. Good to make scratch stock out of. Here's one I got from Garrett Hack. Anyway, I'm going to use this one here. This is a 3/16 cock bead, and I'm going to take it apart and freshen up the edge because I know it's dull from the last time I used it. They last quite a while, but this one is needs a little freshening up. Put the blade back in the handle. It's just trial and error to get it in there at the right position. So I've got it in there, I've tightened it up. They have to be really tight. Try it on this piece of poplar and just see how it got in the right place. I have to keep this fence against the wood and cut until it bottoms out right here on the wood. You can do it on the pull stroke or the push stroke or both. Just keep going until the piece side over here forms the shape of that 3/16 chainsaw file. Now see, it's stopped cutting and this is not yet round. So what that means is I need to drive this down just a wee bit more. So I was able to hit this with a hammer, move it down without loosening any of the bolts. And that's pretty close to round right there. Seems to be going better when I push it away from me, probably because of the grain. It helps to get straight grain wood for this. This landing here has a radius on it in this direction, so I can tilt this way or that way and it'll still cut about to the same depth. You can make this stuff with a router, then you got to sand it. I'm going to take it over to the table and check that I have enough length for finished cock bead to make the drawer. And I do, there's plenty here. So that's one piece. Takes 2 of them for each drawer, 2 short pieces on the ends. And this piece of wood is 3/4 of an inch thick, and I didn't use half of it. So I'm going to go over here and make the other cock bead for this particular drawer out of the same piece of wood and take it off on this side. So we're almost done with this second cock bead. We'll be sure there are no flat places left. And I need pieces 15 inches long. Sent this piece through the bandsaw and peeled off 2 pieces of cock bead from each side, so they're the same thickness. Then I sent them through the surface planer and got them close. I'm going to take them down now with a hand plane. There's a little rabbet here that's left right here. So I take that down to where it's disappeared. It should be the right thickness. Also, it gets rid of the snipe that's here and here on the ends. So there's a piece of cock bead. And it's going to go right here, like so, after I cut a rabbet for it to fit in. I've got to plane down the other piece. So after ripping the cock bead down to thickness and planing it final thickness, I still had some work to do on the ends. And I can do that where it was difficult to do it when it was on the full thickness, meaning 3/4 of an inch or so. I can now get the work done on the ends if I need to. By that I mean I got way more than I need and I could just cut it off. We're back at the drawer in the table. It fits very well in that it moves freely. Over here on the left side, the space between the drawer edge and the leg is virtually zero. I have a feeler gauge here, 2/1000 thick, and it fits in this slot at the bottom and it slides freely. And it gets right here and it starts to bind. So what that tells me is either the bottom of the drawer or the top of this blade is not perfectly flat. But you can't see it. It's inconsequential. And over here on the right side of the drawer, here's a 15/1000 thick feeler gauge and it moves freely in here. So that means that this thing is maybe 20 thousandths wide. So it's 0 over here, 20 over here. It's a little wider at the top than it is at the bottom. So if I can get this trued up so it's the same, whatever it is, top to bottom, then I can split that, put half of it here and half of it over there. That's the first thing I want to do. So here's the drawer in the vise. Put a little water on it. This is the bottom, this is the top. Check that, feeling for the groove for the bottom. Put a little water on the end. Makes it a little bit easier to plane. All I really want to do is take a little bit off of the bottom here, try to make this gap the same. It's a little wider up here than it is here. With the little bit of work I did on the corner of the drawer, the dimension is good across here. When I push it hard against this side, the play in it, space between the drawer and the opening is uniform top to bottom. I want the drawer to ride on the side. I want the bottom of the drawer front to be up so it does not ride on this. At the same time, I want the opening at the bottom and the space at the top and the space at the bottom to be the same as half of what I got over here. So that the opening around the drawer front to the eye is the same all the way around. So what I've got to do is remove this to roughly 10 or 12 thousandths and do the same at the top. So I'm going to do that with a hand plane. This is the bottom edge of the drawer front and it is square to the front itself. And I want to keep it that way. I don't want to remove wood and leave it out of square in either direction. Turn it over and do the same thing on the top. Okay, by trial and error, I've gotten the reveal around the drawer about the same on all four sides. So the next thing to do is to cut the rabbet to accept the cock bead itself. Here's the top edge of the drawer. Cock bead goes here, like so. It's not rounded up here on this edge. It is back here. So I got to cut a rabbet to let this piece in. The rabbet needs to be as deep as in this direction as the cock bead is thick, and it's got to go all the way down to here. So before I do that, I'm going to take a marking gauge and I'm going to cut the rabbet with the router. It's going to remove all this material back as far as the thickness of the cock bead. Before I do that though, to prevent any tear out, taking a marking gauge and set it at the thickness of the cock bead, and I'm going to mark the front all the way across, or top to bottom, indicates that's where I want the cock bead rabbet to end. The purpose of this again is to prevent any tear out. I'm using a spiral upcut bit in the router, which will pull it shouldn't cause any tear out anyway. This cherry is hard as a rock. I'll turn around and do the bottom edge, and I'm also going to do the ends. I'll do the end because the cock bead goes on the end as well. What I've done here is I've set at the router table with a spiral upcut bit, which means it's going to pull the debris down because the router's upside down, of course. Set the height of the bit, thickness of the cock bead. On the drawer sides, we want to leave these dovetails exposed. So the cock bead width at the sides is from the end of here out to the front plus the part that's exposed. But the cock bead top and bottom goes all the way back to this circuit, flush here. So on the sides, I set the fence the right distance for this line out here. Now I got to reset the fence to cut the top and the bottom. So here's the cock bead fitted to the right side of the drawer. The joints here are not your typical miter joints. I'm going to show how. I'm going to take this away. I'm just holding it up here, and I'm going to zoom in on this corner. So here's the joint, and it is mitered, but it's not a typical miter. The piece on the end is only a 1/2 inch wide in this direction, and it is a typical miter. But this piece here is very atypical because it is wider by this much from here to here than this piece is. The purpose of that, of course, is to fill this gap left right here. This was cut away when I made the rabbet to fit the cock bead in. So how do we make this joint? So we're going to the table saw to start this piece, finish it by hand, and then I'll show you how to make the short one. The short one, of course, is very easy to make. So what we have here is a miter sled on the table saw. I have a cross-cut blade installed, and the depth of cut is set from here to here. And that's dictated by the short piece that goes on the ends of the drawer. This one was cut like so the one on the other end has to be cut this way. The mark I've made that I'm trying to cut to is right here, and I have to sneak up on it and dare not cut it too short, because if I do, create a lot of extra work. So here goes. This is my miter cutter, and I'm going to cut this joint. I'm going to shave it off with this. This device is made for picture framers for shaving off, getting pieces dead square and exactly the same length for a picture frame. So here's how it works. The knife is over here on this side. It moves back and forth with this lever. This fence right here is, I've set it at 45 degrees to the knife, and there's a stop for it so you can get it dead on. So now we're going to trim this piece. So here's the knife right here. The knife must be on 5/16 thick, so it's quite heavy. You can see it moving like so. Here's my wood, slide it up like so. And I'm going to trim this edge here, and I'm going to stop right here. You can see a shaving rolling off of there. And I've got to stop. I'm not finished over here, but I can't go any deeper over here. I don't think that's enough to get me where I want to go, so I'm going to take another shaving right off of here. I do not want to cut this thing too short. So I've got this shaving right to there. And as far as a very sharp chisel, laying it on the miter I just cut and finishing this up. And I can see where I need to finish that shaving up. You can see where you need to pick it up and just do it by hand. And be careful here you don't cut yourself. Something slips. And I clean up the bottom like so. Use white glue. It has a little bit longer open time than yellow glue. I did not want to use the old brown glue because I need a little bit more viscosity with this vertical surface here. I'm going to paint it on here. And you can see the squeeze out. Let's get some clamps on it. You never have too many clamps. So the shiny things you see on the drawer front is the reflections onto that packaging tape. But you can see how the clamps are restricting my access to get any squeeze out off. So I'm hoping that packaging tape solved this problem. It's about 3 hours later, so let's see what we have here. It looks like the tape worked, kept the squeeze out off of the drawer front. I think this tape was a success. These ears here, I'll cut them off, put a piece of paper here between this little flush cut saw and the wood, which will prevent the saw from scratching this surface here. It's designed for a flush cut, but it still will scratch sometimes. Put my finger on the saw, hold it flat, keep me from tipping it up. Well, it's a pull stroke saw, so Japanese style. Here's the drawer with the cock bead in place, and it's open. The next thing to do, we put the bottom in the drawer. So here are the 3 boards I've milled for the drawer bottom. They've been rough milled, I guess just short of 1/2 inch thick. They've been sitting around for several weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and you can tell this one has a significant twist in it. That one's twisted, this one's, when it spins like that, it means it's bowed this way a little bit. This one is got a little bit of twist in it. So I've got to fine tune the milling, get rid of the twist and the bow and the cupping, whatever else might be wrong, get them flat. All right, all 3 pieces have been run over the joiner, flatten them, then through the planer, and thickness to 3/8 of an inch thick. And recall that we cut a groove here in the bottom of the drawer. This is the back of the drawer. Cut a groove in the bottom, which runs 3 sides. The groove has been removed here, so we're going to slide these boards in this way into the groove. But of course, they won't slide until we get the right thickness and the right length. So the next thing I'm going to do is try to cut them the right length so they'll fit between this edge of the groove and the edge of the other groove on the opposite side. So there's 2 ways to measure this. Get a ruler that's long enough, and when I present this ruler to this situation, the scale that's available to me here is centimeters, and I like to work in centimeters when I can. It's less sensitive to mistakes, so I'm reading just proud of 36 centimeters. The other way is get a scrap, just a scrap of poplar, and cut it, sneak up on it, and it fits in the groove. This is a little too tight. So I'm going to use this and set up the table saw so I can sneak up on the length here. So using that scrap, I've set up the miter gauge on the table saw, and I'm going to nibble just a wee bit off of this scrap till I get down to where I want to be. So I've got this scrap cut the right length. It slides in here, just a little bit of play in it, maybe 1/16 of an inch or so. I'm going to slide it all the way forward to be sure it fits in the groove all the way up here. It's important that this Rabbet up here, and especially in the corners, be cleaned out fully, because if one side goes in farther than the other, it kind of skews the whole thing way back here. And if it's bad enough, you can have a corner exposed over here that's not in the groove at all, way back here on one side or the other. Push it in as far as it'll go. Take a pencil and draw a line on it, pull it out, and see how well the line draw is parallel to the edge. And this is reasonably parallel now, so see I was successful getting to that mark. Now I want to cut 3 pieces to length. What I've done here is drawn the profile I'm going to put on the edge of the drawer bottom pieces, so that this distance right here will be such that it'll fit in the groove. And we're going to do this on this table saw with standing it on its end, and the height of the blade will be from here to here. Of course, the top of the blade is going to make this notch. Now, if you raise the blade high enough, you can extend this line on out here like so, and you end up with this. Same angle, just the blade height is higher. Kind of like this, so that's what I'm going to use. But a third option is this right here, and I don't think you can do this with the table saw. I have a shaper cutter that'll do it, and you can also do it where this is a curve that goes something like so. Lots of different shaper cutters will do that. There are some options for you. Router bits will do that as well. So we're set up again at the table saw. I've left this cross-cut blade in here. We've got one cut that's a rip cut and several that are cross cut. So I've tilted the blade towards me 7 degrees, put on this tall fence which slides like so, and it is square to the blade in its 90-degree position. And I've also clipped on a fence back here that is square to the tabletop, because the piece we're going to be cutting is going to be in here like so, and it's safer to have a backstop back here that's fixed. So what I'm going to do is move this over towards me like so and nibble at it until I'm satisfied with the amount of wood that's left and how it fits in the bottom side of the drawer. So here we go. So apparently the top of the blade is right here now, and we're still too thick down here to fit in the groove. So as I take off more, we're going to create that notch that I pointed out on the drawing. If you don't like the notch, you could tilt the blade more and it'll disappear. The more you tilt it, this line will creep down this way, but I really kind of like the notch, so that's the way I'll go with it. So this piece slides in easily. I don't want it tight. I don't want it to rattle around, so now I can cut the other two this way, but I also have to cut the same here on the front board. So let's do that now. So without changing the tilt of the blade or the location of the fence, I have made one change, of course. I've taken off that backstop fence, if you will, that was clamped on. It's gone, but I'm going to do this rip cut now to thin this up so it'll slide into the groove in the bottom edge of the front. So before we put these in the drawer itself, I'm going to square up the opposite edge, the one is still a rough sawn, square it up and straighten it up on the chute board. So we put the piece with the rip cut bevel on the front edge, put it in first and push it all the way home, but I'll get to that later here. So what I've got here is 1.5 inches too much wood, and I don't really want to take it all off of one board. I want to take maybe 3/4 off of this one. I think I want to leave that one, take the rest off of this one. So I ripped that off and then cleaned up the cuts on the chute board. So anytime you have to do this, you want playing with the grain, and it's very apparent here that the grain is running thinner and thinner, and it runs out this way, kind of like so, that way. So that's the way you want to plane, and fortunately that's where my line is. So the line is thicker on the far end, so that's where I'm going to start. Let's see what that looks like. Now what I'm doing to attach this back is I'm going to put one screw in here, a brass screw, and we countersunk, oversized through this piece, and to fit the screw in the drawer back. So I want some slop in here. I want this thing to be able to move in this direction. So I'm putting a little cannon wax on the screw itself and run it in the hole, be sure everything fits. And that works just fine, just like that. I'm not going to pull the screw down tight against the countersink. I want it up here proud, so there's space between it, so it can move. But also, to enable it to move, I'm going to enlarge the hole and the countersink. So I'm going to elongate the hole in this direction. I don't care about this way, just towards me and away from me. This little rat tail file. File will go in a little deeper. Don't need a lot. I'm going to do the other side. Now I'm going left to right with it, not up and down. Pushing to my left and then pushing to my right. I don't want a larger hole, I want an elongated hole. Well, this is the number 9 gouge. Just going to elongate it like so. Turn it around this way and do the same thing. Okay, so there's that. I'm not gluing anything. There's no glue anywhere on this drawer bottom. So there you have that. This is a Boston piece that I made. Boston pieces had a habit of running drawer bottoms, grain running front to back of the drawer. I didn't want to do that, and the reason is if the grain runs front to back, the boards are going to expand and contract left to right across the piece. If it expands enough, the drawer is going to bind. So I always like to run the boards for the bottom left to right so that the expansion goes front to back. So I want to show you what I did on this piece. Because it's so wide, a thin bottom will sag. So to keep from sagging, I've got a rib in here, right here, which is goes through the bottom, 5/8 thick, and it has a groove in it, just like the groove over here on this side. So this thin bottom pieces are spanning from the drawer side to here and from here to the other side. Gets around that problem. Boston's the only place I know of that you will see that routinely, that the boards in the bottoms run front to back. Probable reason is there's a shorter span. I made two mistakes on this drawer that I want to point out. Not because I like to point out my mistakes, so you don't make them. When I laid out these dovetails, I did not take into account I was going to cut this huge rabbet in the bottom, or to capture the bottom. This half pin should have been way up here somewhere, because I didn't leave very much wood when I cut the bottom out of the drawer front. Now I added it back when I put on the cock bead, but it would have been stronger to have left the original wood there in the first place. The second mistake I made, I cut all these dovetails with my crosscut saw. They're all rip cuts, and the workmanship shows it. I'm not proud of it. I'm not going to do it over. If you look at the dovetails on the back, I caught it in time, and they're much more closely meets my standards. So there you have the drawer. If you want to glue these things together, you can do so, but I don't usually do it. If I want to listen to noise, I go sit on my screen porch, listen to my neighbor's leaf blowers.